we really feel like if we can get 16% of all churches in the US to be reproducing, multiplying churches, church planting churches, we feel like that really could transform the landscape of the United States.
Hey, everybody, welcome to C3 Church Global podcast. And we are thrilled to be speaking with you today. We love leaders, love pastors, and want to do all we can to help you, equip you, strengthen you, support you. And we have the privilege today of talking with one of Christianity's finest leaders in the world, Dave Ferguson. Welcome, Dave.
Phil, it is really, really good to be with you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, people, let me tell you first a little bit about Dave. He's the founding pastor of Community Christian Church Chicago, which is a multi-expression missional community passionate about helping people find their way back to God. It's grown from a few college friends to reaching thousands of people in Chicagoland and around the world. Dave is also the CEO and president of Exponential, which is possibly more well-known around the world than other things that Dave has done. It's a catalyst for developing multipliers of churches and disciple makers globally. He's an award-winning author, many books. One's called The Big Idea, another Exponential, another On the Verge, another Finding Your Way Back to God, Starting Over, Hero Maker. And I think your most recent book is Bless, B-L-E-S-S. I heard you speak about this at the most recent Exponential Conference, which are 5 everyday ways to love your neighbor and change the world. Dave is married to his lovely wife, Sue, and they have 3 adult kids. That about describes you, I think, Dave.
Yeah, it probably oversold. We should try to undersell and then over-deliver.
I agree totally with that. Absolutely. In that conference that we were at, wonderful conference, congratulations. And it was amazing, the organization and the amount of breakout sessions all over that huge campus. And I found it very inspiring, just the organizational skills that were involved in putting all that together. And certainly it spoke of a lot of hard work in the back room. You are doing all this work. Ultimately, it seemed to me to try and create disciple-making churches.
Well, and specifically, when we talk about what Exponential is trying to do, starting in the United States, and we can talk about beyond that, but in the US, we actually call it the 16% mission. So we want to see 16% of all churches in the US become reproducing or multiplying churches. And your listeners might be going like, that seems kind of random. Why 16%? Are you familiar with the innovation curve of how change actually gets transmitted? Basically, what
Right.
you have is you have about, in most every kind of change, you have about 2.5% that are the early adopters. And there are the innovators, rather. I'm sorry, the innovators. And Phil, you've consistently been one of those people in a number of categories. But you have those folks that are innovators. But then you have another 13.5% that are early adopters. And if you can get that 16% on board with anything, it'll influence the whole. Malcolm Gladwell, maybe you remember his book from some time ago called Tipping Point. He writes
Yep.
about this. You get 16%, it influences the whole. And so at Exponential, we really feel like if we can get 16% of all churches in the US to be reproducing, multiplying churches, church planting churches, and we can talk about why church planting is so important if you want to, we feel like that really could transform the landscape of the United States. And about 10 years ago, when we first did the homework on this, we were at 4%. And over the last decade, we've moved to 5%, 6%. We're now at the needle's at 7%. So we still got a long way to go. But every one of those percentages, every point is actually another 3,600 churches that are kind of saying, no, we're now multiplying or reproducing churches. So we hope in the next decade and are going after, how do we get 16% of all churches in the U.S. to be reproducing or multiplying churches?
That's incredible. Well, I guess from our point of view, if you're a disciple-making church, like if you disciple individuals, then and that culture travels through your congregation, then it becomes an entire church becomes a disciple maker in terms of giving birth to new churches. And I think it's just that it becomes a whole cultural mindset. Everybody's seeing it and thinking it and wanting to actually keep making that happen. But it's the thing is it's not as dramatic as additional growth. We
Right.
have big events and add people. So why have you opted for this? What initiated you to originate this thinking that if we can get to 16%, we'll tip the church into an enormous revival?
Well, I mean, again, I guess I don't think I originated. I mean, and probably like you, Phil, when I read the New Testament, particularly when I get to the book of Acts, and it's like, you get to Acts 1:8, and it's like the last thing Jesus says before he takes off. He's like, okay, one more time, guys. We're going to start this thing in Jerusalem, and it's going to go from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. And what he's describing is a movement, a sociological movement. And so for me, it's always been like, okay, how do we restore the church back to its movemental form that it was originally supposed to be in order to accomplish the mission? And so when we talk about the 16% mission, that's just another way of expressing if we can just get the first 16% of churches to restore that original movemental form, which at the core, as you described, is disciple making, then we'll change the spiritual landscape of the United States. So it's I would like to think that it's really grounded in Jesus' words, Jesus' challenge, and really solid theology and really solid ecclesiology of what the church is actually supposed to be.
Fantastic. And that is the goal of Exponential Conference, as I understand it. And obviously it's referring to exponential growth in the future. So tell us about Exponential. How did that get birthed and how it's traveled over history?
Yeah, oh my, probably about 18 or 19 years ago, there was a little church planting conference, and every year, and they'd been going on for probably 30 years, and they'd have a couple hundred people that would show up, and um, everybody kind of wanted it to happen, but nobody really wanted to be in charge. And it was just a bunch of little church planted associations. And they asked my buddy Todd, who is the executive pastor out in Washington D.C., if he would wanted to lead it for the next year. And he was brilliant organizer, administrator. And so he said, "Yeah, I'll lead it." And then he called me after he volunteered to lead it and said, "Listen, I'm going to run this thing, but why don't you be the upfront guy?" Because he was more like an executive pastor. He wasn't used to being up front. And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we were already friends. So that next year we went from a couple hundred folks to I think we had 700 or 800 folks that showed up. And then the next year we
Hmm,
doubled again. And
hmm.
essentially, we just never gave it back. And we just kind of kept doing it. And by God's grace, I mean, Exponential is more known for its conference, but we actually have four verticals underneath it that do a lot of different things now. And then we also have an Exponential Europe, an Exponential Australia, and an Exponential Espanol. And so wherever we can help accelerate, you know, multiplication, we want to be involved in doing that.
That's incredible. Yeah. And so with church planning, like there was, I think, if I remember correctly, or else one was referred to, there was like an altar call for church planters to go out. We do that at all of our regional conferences. We have about maybe 14 regional conferences each year. And definitely we want to see a harvest of church planters getting involved. So I've not seen that anywhere else except at your conference. I thought this is phenomenal when people can come
Well,
forward and
yeah, now you've piqued my curiosity. So tell me, how do you do that at your conference?
well, we'll preach about maybe the local church or our vision, a million worshipers meeting together on Sunday morning around the world, and achieving that by disciple making churches. But also we would want them to be on an altar call because it's not it's not a formula. It's a spirit empowered activity, church planting. And if it's just done like a strategy with formulas and checklists, I think it's like some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord. I mean, you can trust
That's right.
business practices instead of God. And all, so we want people to birth churches out of a God encounter, not just I've got a good idea, I want to go plant a church over here. And if they can have that supernatural encounter as an objective and subjective reality, they can touchstone back then. They know it was God when they meet those tough times. That, like Paul said to Timothy, war a good warfare by the prophecies that went before on you. So when you're in the fight and you've got somebody who had a word for you, that they knew things they could never have known otherwise, or they had a vision, or they had some supernatural encounter, that is very stabilizing in challenging times for them. And so we would preach and then just say, hey, put your life on the altar for God.
Because what happened for us is that very first conference that when we took over, we had a guy, maybe well, you're out in Southern California. You know Gene Apple? Gene's at Eastside Christian Church. It's in
I've
Anaheim,
heard of him.
Fullerton.
I don't know him.
Brilliant leader, great guy. He actually was speaking at our last session and just kind of moved by the Spirit spontaneously. He said, "You know what? I feel like some of you are supposed to plant churches. And if that's you, we just want you to come down forward here. We want to pray for you. And
Right.
we want this to be the moment that you decide that." And we were stunned by how many people came forward and said, "Yeah, I want to plant a church."
Amazing.
And it wasn't something we programmed, wasn't something we decided to do up front, but the response was so overwhelming that every year after that, and we've done that, and at all of our, whether it's our global conference or our national conference, or even what we're doing in Exponential Europe, Australia, and like if you were at our most recent global conference, we had somewhere it was close to 1,000 people that came forward and made some kind of commitment, and we tell them, we anoint them with oil, we pray for them, we say we want this to be like your commissioning, and
Yeah.
and I'll tell you what, for your leaders that are listening in, maybe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. I am convinced that one of the things that we're missing right now is we need to ask. We talk, but I think we need to actually ask people to take action. And I think there's a lot of times we have gatherings like this that we train, we equip, and like you said, strategies. And I love a good strategy. Oh my goodness, I love a
Yeah.
good strategy.
Yeah.
But at some point, there also has to be a moment where you're going like compelled by the Spirit. You're going like, okay, I'm all in. And I think
Right.
one of the mistakes we're making right now as leaders is we don't like back. I'm going to sound like an old guy, but it used to be like there'd be church camps, and kids would go to
Yeah.
camp and you'd go like, hey, who's going to go? Who's going to say yes to ministry? And you'd ask them. And there used to
Right.
be certain times in every church where you wouldn't just ask for salvation, but you'd ask people to give their whole lives to going into the ministry. And I think we need to intentionally in our churches and in conferences, just like you're talking about, find spaces where we ask people and give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Well, for us, that is just part of the culture. You don't reap a harvest unless you reap it. You got to ask, and even uh, the idea of teaching about things. Some pastors actually think that's going to achieve the thing. So I teach about all sorts of altar calls, and including for salvation, for people coming back to Christ, for people bringing finances to the Lord. And I guess people have become oversensitive to being PC and putting pressure on people or anything like that. And I feel like as soon as I mean, most services I am in, I will ask for people to come to Christ, and often there's a crowd like 50 to 100 people come forward, and the whole church says, we haven't seen that for years." I go, "What do you mean?" Because they don't bring people down the front. They just want them to stay unobserved in their seat, and I think that's okay, but I want them to experience the sense of God, and that experience, that feeling that I met with God, and causing them to step out of their comfort area. It's the beginning of a long journey of disciple making, where you're going to have to make some challenging decisions to step out. And so I agree with you completely. If we don't ask, you don't get it.
No, 100%. No, I'm with you.
So out of Exponential, what happens to those 1,000 people on that altar call? Do they go back to their own churches and start a conversation with their pastor, or is there any follow up on that?
Yeah, that's what happens with a lot of folks. But as we look over our shoulder too, I mean, now, almost 20 years into this, I mean, what's fun is that actually some of the people who are even now main stage speakers, they will recite the time where, like I was just with Ryan Kwan, who's out in the Bay Area at Resonate Church, a very large church planting church out there, and he'll talk about the very first time he came to Exponential. He had no intention of planting a church. A friend of his
Hmm.
invited him. And he
Wow.
shows up. He did. He just felt like this like God's spirit was saying, you need to do this. And so he just followed through. And it was that pivotal moment. Or maybe Joby Martin at 1122.
Yeah.
Joby, same thing.
He was at that
Derwin Gray.
conference. He was speaking, and he
Yeah,
said,
oh,
"I remember when I was down on this altar."
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Or Derwin Gray, Derwin, who opened, I think, at the conference. Derwin's another guy who remembers
Amazing.
the moment at Exponential where he said yes to church planting. Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, so what happens is, yeah,
Fantastic.
they'll have conversations with their leaders, and we try to create an environment too where leaders aren't trying to hold on to their best people, but they're really trying to empower them to do greater things for the kingdom. And because a
Yeah.
lot of times in large churches or in small churches, quite frankly, the pastors will hold on to their staff, and some of them have tremendous capacity and tremendous gifts that need to be used beyond even where they are right now, and they need to think in terms of, legacy and how do I empower them to be all that God meant for them to be. And so we really
Right.
encourage that too.
Yeah. In our church, I used to tell everybody we only send our best, and that's why I'm still here. You know, and
Well
and
done,
and
well done.
so yeah, we you don't want to get rid of people into church planning, and
No,
and you only ever reap what you sow anyway. So if you sow
yeah,
quality people, you're going to keep reaping quality people.
yeah, right.
So in terms of developing leaders, what strategies and what kind of cultures have you seen work?
I mean, one of the things that, and I write about this in our book, Hero Maker. Um, we've kind of been able to identify a handful of, actually there's 5 practices that we talk about in that book that are the kinds of practices that leaders who multiply other leaders consistently do. um, we put together a think tank, and we gathered twice in Atlanta just to kind of brainstorm, like, okay, what are the consistent practices we see over and over again in leaders that multiply other leaders, and not just the senior level leaders but any kind of leader. And we made this long list on post-it notes, probably had 30, 35 different characteristics or traits. We started marking some off and narrowed them down. And but in the process of that, I remember it wasn't me. It was another guy who actually looked at the list and he said, "You know what's unique about these kind of leaders that actually multiply other leaders?" And then he said, "It's like they're trying not to be the hero, and they're trying to make heroes of other people." And somebody
Right.
grabbed a hold and they started saying, "Yeah, they're hero makers, is what they are." And
Fantastic.
so we took that whole list and we kind of pared it down to the top 5, and we called it hero making or hero maker, and it's 5 practices of leaders that multiply leaders.
Right. At the base of that thinking is a really important uh, concept, which is security. And I've found that probably the most limiting factor in most churches, even within their internal growth, is an insecure leader, an insecure pastor. But if a guy is secure, he can make a hero out of another person and he's
Yeah.
unthreatened by it. But when an insecure leader is in place, and there's a lot of leaders who feel threatened by another voice rising in their congregation or by a influential business person or a very strong woman or somebody having a successful Bible study in their house. And if you get threatened, you tend to subconsciously reject these people and they feel it. But if they were feeling like they're included, they will help build your church. Like in Isaiah 54, it says, let them stretch out the curtains of your dwellings. So if you're a permission-giving church, your people grow your church, not you. It's not platform-based growth, it's pew-based growth. And to actually release people in what they have and hope that they do better than you, hope that they get credit, hope that they get a glow on their life. I think that takes a secure personality. And so helping pastors just be okay with that is a big step forward.
And I wonder if your experience, and my hunch is yes, but I wonder if your experience has been the same as mine, Phil, because it almost feels counterintuitive at first, but the more you lean into that, and the more you empower people, the more you release people, the more you're permission giving, the more you're trying to be a hero maker of other people. And you
Right.
actually do send them out and then you cheer them on and you give them resources as best you can and you give them your time. My experience has been my influence actually grows. And
Yeah.
initially, isn't that why your thought as a young leader, your initial thought is, oh no, if I let that person go, then they're gonna have influence and they're gonna have influence and my influence is gonna decrease.
Right.
But and I think in God's economy, it's actually the opposite. The more I mean, you've now C3 has 600 and some churches?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you had one large church in Sydney. I
Right.
mean, and again, you're not doing it for the notoriety, but I mean, as a leader, you want to have the biggest influence you possibly can. And the way you've
Right.
done that is by giving permission to other people to fulfill their dreams. And
Yeah.
man, I think a lot of kingdom leaders, exactly your point, miss that you can have. I mean, and I'll speak frank. I won't speak for you, but like I'm an okay teacher. Like I'm not. There's not like 50,000 people are going to show up to hear me talk. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But what I
Right.
am good at, and I think a lot of people are good at that, is helping somebody else fulfill their dream and then training someone else how to do that. And you start multiplying that. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah.
the stuff that's the stuff movements are made of. And a lot of us, where maybe only a few of us can actually fill stadiums, a lot of us can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
No, totally. That I remember our youth leader in Sydney. He was hugely successful. He and his wife, and they were doing a brilliant, brilliant job. And one day they had 5 different groups, and so they had 5 different bands that they were raising up in amongst all the youth. And one of the members of one of the other groups came to this our youth leader's wife, and started singing the praises of their group leader, saying, "Oh, they're just amazing, they're incredible." And this lady, she got offended, and she told everybody this was a part of a message she gave. She said, "I was so offended. I thought you should understand that you wouldn't even have a group if it wasn't for us. You wouldn't even have a band if it wasn't for you. You wouldn't even have that leader if it wasn't." And then she felt the Lord check her and say, "No,
Mhm.
you praise those people. Give them the credit." And that was a big lesson she found for her. And I mean, over the years, there are different levels of that happening where it gets even more challenging. But if you release people and empower them to become successful, they will thank you for the rest of their life. But if you limit them and hold them back, the only way they can leave is badly, and it'll create a split, and they're going to resent you for the rest of their life. So,
Exactly right.
yeah, people leave, they're going to go. Everybody's going to leave your church. they're going to
Yeah.
die or they're going to move on somewhere else. You have people for a series of time, and in discipling, you just thank God if you had people for 6 months that you discipled, you got involved, you helped them become a better version of who they are. And
And
it won't be their whole life. It'd be just one area of their life, maybe.
and don't you think too that I mean, I feel like the older I get, the more I begin to see the leaders around me, like I'm like as a spiritual father. And like on my own kids, you talked about I have 3 adult kids. If there's anything I want more than my own success, I want my kids
Yeah,
to be successful. And I want to
totally.
do everything I can. And I mean, like some of the best days in like, okay, so I'm going to brag a little bit. Like one
Yeah.
of my boys was a 2-time All-American. And
Huh.
and he and it was in the steeplechase, which is an event in track and field. My whole
Yeah.
family was there, and both his brother and his sister were there, and it was such a great day. One of the best days of my life was when one of my kids was
Totally.
successful. And
Totally.
I think I feel like I feel the same way regarding spiritual. Like I have a friend, Troy McMahon. Troy
Yeah.
was one of my best friends. He planted our first location, the community, multiplied another site, brilliant leader. He came to me and said, "Hey, I want to go do this in Kansas City." Now, yeah, part of me was sad because I was going to lose a friend as far as
Right.
proximity, but he's gone out there. It's now a multi-site church. They've started 3 networks. They've planted over 50 churches in Kansas City.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, I'm like so like proud of him. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And here's the thing that I think our people miss. That's not unique. That those people are sitting in everybody's churches, and
Yeah.
it might be in a. It's not just big church. I mean, every church has those people sitting there that can do these things.
Oh, that's right. And there's gold right under your nose. You don't need to be writing off to another big church for a youth leader. Yeah.
No,
And they never come ready made, and that's what disciple making is all about. You prayed for a pot, God gave you clay. Uh, you prayed for a tree, God gave you a seed, and so it's like you are part of the miracle of transforming people's lives. And if we can see ourselves as that, not just a preacher on a stage, but actually somebody who is helping people learn new ways of living that are going to make them more successful. And for me, that's the greatest joy in life. In fact, I mean, if you understand God at all, that's Him. He didn't give
right.
birth to you into your kingdom. Say, now we've got him in here. Let's make him a real loser. let's just mess his life up and let's turn him into a poor wretch. I mean, God is he's the loudest voice in the cloud of witnesses. I mean, there's a
Yes,
voice above every other voice up in that. We're surrounded, running around that Colosseum. And if you listen, you can hear the voice of Jesus saying, "Come on." And
that's right.
he's
That is
cheering
right.
us on, no doubt.
Yes,
That's the Holy Spirit. He's the comforter, the encourager. Hey, Dave, can I chat with you about a totally different subject?
sure. Fire
Uh,
away.
yeah, you mentioned while you were there, uh, and it's heartbreaking that you were invited into a circle of ministers that would meet in Chicago, and then you said today, out of the I think it was 12 that were in the room, that you knew of two. I might have those numbers wrong, but that you could now still feel like you could have a minister's conversation with them. Uh, and I guess people, they would know some of the name. I'm not asking for that. But how did you cope? How did you cope? Because we're seeing in recent years, it's not just one or two. It's been quite a few who have tumbled, and we have a generation of people who are aching for authenticity because the cynicism is so high. The splash effect of that goes across every minister. Are these guys okay? And the question is in a lot of people's minds. And I'm wanting to help people cope with this when it happens. I've been following Jesus 53 years and found it's it's become more common, but I learned to cope with it very early on in my Christian life when one of my heroes fell really badly. Uh, and I wouldn't say I've ever learned fully to cope with it, but how can we help people not grow cynical and stay the course?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, Phil. I mean, two things come to mind. Um, and the first one I think is I think we need to, and I hope all of your listeners will take this to heart, is we need to live a life that's worth reproducing. If we can be, and again, I want to stress on this word, healthy leaders. Okay, if we can be healthy leaders, I think that is a compelling, attractive thing that also gives hope, that maybe where in places they have lost hope. Um, so I mean, someone like yourself, I mean, you said you've been in the game for how many? 53 years? You've been in the game
53.
53 years. 53 years. I mean, as discouraging it is that I couldn't reassemble that small group of pastors in Chicago, it's encouraging to hear from somebody who still loves Jesus, is still married, is still doing all the things that is not flawlessly, but trying their very best to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And so I think that's one thing. As I think as leaders, um, maybe the most important thing you do is leading a reproducible life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I would say the second thing is, there's a simple practice. I'm going to actually, in the book that I got coming out next March, it's called Multiplier, but its subtitle is How to Be a Healthy Leader That Creates a Lasting Impact, and it addresses this exact question. Because I think you need to have, if you're going to make a lasting impact, I'm talking about not just over 5 years or even 10 years, I'm talking about 20, 30, 40, 53 years. Um, there needs to be an internal life that's worth reproducing, but then there's some external practices you do. But to speak to the internal part, there's a very simple exercise that I do every day, and basically this is my journal, and I write these four letters RPMS in my journal every day, and R stands for relational, P stands for physical, M stands for mental, and S stands for spiritual. Relational, physical, mental, and spiritual. RPMS. And basically it comes right out of Luke 2:52 that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. It was his own development plan. And so what I will do every day is I will pause, and this only takes me, I mean, it's less than 3 or 4 minutes. But every day I'll just kind of reflect, and I've done a couple different ways, but recently I'm doing it with a gauge. I'll just make a little gauge. Am I empty? Am I full? Relationally. Am I empty or am I full physically? Am I empty or am I full mentally? Am I empty or am I full spiritually? And by simply just reflecting on that and telling myself the truth about where I am today. Because let's be honest, I mean, all of us drift. We drift relationally, we get tempted, we drift physically, we get lazy, we drift mentally. Sometimes we start to feel depressed or anxious. We drift spiritually. Sometimes we feel closer to God or closer. And here's what happened, I would say, with my friends that were in that group. Some of them ended up a place they never intended to be because they drifted day after day after day and probably never actually reflected on certain areas of their life, where they found themselves doing things with money that they shouldn't have done, or they found themselves in inappropriate relationships, that places that I'm sure at some point they never would have imagined. And I and this simple tool for me, and I'm going to pass it along in this book, of just simply starting your day by just reflecting on those four areas, those four gauges: relational, physical, mental, and spiritual. How am I doing? Kind of trying to hear from God and say, okay, what do I need to do to course correct? Because we all drift. It's not whether you're not going to drift. You all drift. We just
Yeah.
got to get back in line with Jesus, get in step with the Spirit. Um, that's been a helpful tool for me in actually trying to be the kind of leader you're talking about that I think gives hope to the next generation.
Yeah. That's great. yeah, measuring yourself, like Paul says, we should judge ourselves so we're not judged by the Lord. And if you can make some judgments about your own life, do a self-evaluation. But I've engaged in the same kind of idea, except I
Okay.
use a 1 to 10 number rather than empty and full. How am I doing mentally, 1 to 10, and etc. But
Awesome.
I used to do it daily. I've definitely backslidden from that, doing it every day. But it's but I did it for a long enough time for it to become part of my mental checklist.
Yeah.
Uh, but I even then I can say that even if you're just doing it yourself on your own, you still have the capacity to drift. And so I've
Absolutely.
found having other people in my world uh, who are close enough and loving enough to ask the right questions, and when I know that that moment is coming, that is a great modifier in your life as well.
Without disclosing more than you feel comfortable, I mean, for my own encouragement, I would love to hear like who are those people or how often does that happen? And only as much as
Every
you feel
three
comfortable.
months, it happens every three
Every three
months.
months.
Yeah, and uh, those people, no, well, they are they're influential people and strong people, but they're within our group, so it's not. I've found that sometimes people who others are saying they're accountable to these guys, they're not really. It's a distant relationship, and they're in another church, and they're a long way off, and they'll say, "Yeah, these guys are pastoring me," but in a closer examination, they're actually not. It's just a reference board or an advisory group.
Yeah.
But if you have people in your world who will ask you um, the right kind of questions that put your feet to the fire a little, and you
Yes.
welcome it if you want that. And I think John Wesley with his Holy Club, when they had those little groups of three, and they
Yeah.
would ask each other, they would confess their faults, and they would. I think if it's got other people involved in that process, I think we would help ourselves a whole lot more
I
from
agree.
being in compromising situations. And if you know that people who have the power to fire you, I think you got to be accountable to people who could actually fire you. It's not.
Oh, that's good. No, that's good. You're right. That's good. And honestly, I mean, too, I mean, and for lack of a better term, but when you've had as much, and forgive me for this term, quote unquote, success as you've had in ministry, and I know you probably don't think of it that way, but those are fewer and fewer people. But for you to intentionally do that is so, so important.
Yeah, I mean it's a my for me it was a response as much as me being into it. So that situation was presented to me as we were looking at the field of everything, and seeing others in trouble. We thought, exactly as you mentioned, the word healthy becomes a really strong word. And so the guys said, that to ensure the good health of our leaders. And so we're trying to gently keep that duplicating and multiplying amongst guys, because there'll be some people who are too eager to take authority over other people, and there might be those who are trying to hide away from it. But uh, I get more and more convinced that just being a self-evaluator is actually not enough. I think we all actually need somebody else to know about what's going on in our world.
You know what? I mean, having said that's interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I have some of that, but I don't think I have it like you're talking about. And I think you're really right. I think that would take what I'm doing with the RPMs to another level. Because if you're doing
Mm,
both those things personally, but also you had that outside kind of accountability, um,
hmm
I think, in fact, I may even I may change a little bit what I put in my book now, thanks to you.
Well, I hope so. I hope it's thanks. Yeah. And
I don't know about listening in. I hope you guys are enjoying the conversation, but I'll tell you what, it's been very beneficial to me. So
that's great, Dave. Yeah, I am I'm wanting to help ministers not give up and become cynical because of others, or else feel justified in their own driftings because others are doing it. And I was
absolutely,
very shocked at one meeting I held a long time ago. We had a presence conference in San Diego, and I just felt a word about calling for ministers were once in the ministry, but had, for various reasons, they were no longer in it. I thought, well, it was a big crowd. There was a lot of people there, but I thought at most there'll be 10 or 12, like 50
yeah,
people came up.
wow,
And so there is a harvest right now. And if we can love these people, not judge them, and
yep,
help them feel like you've got a call and a gift on your life. And it's not about getting back into the ministry. It's about getting your life back,
yeah,
getting back into a healthy lifestyle. And on that basis, the call of God can accomplish some amazing things.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I think if we can work together, as elderly guys, well, you're not elderly. I'm the but the
I'm on
sense
your
of
heels.
we want fathers in amongst the younger guys is deep. There's an
Yeah,
ache for that, and to know what being a father is, I think for older generation men and women, there's so much to offer, so much,
yeah,
and
I agree.
I'm sure that we can inspire a whole new generation of fathers to actually not try and be the heroes, but be hero makers, like you're saying.
There you go. That's the hope.
That's the hope. Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on board. Thanks so much. And I feel like we could talk for hours, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Well,
people will listen for hours.
like you said before we jumped on here, next time you're in Chicago, let me know a
Yeah,
little in advance. Chicago style pizza, that'll be on me, or maybe we can do even better than that. But yeah, I would enjoy a conversation between the two of us over a good meal.
thanks, Dave. Been a pleasure talking with you, and God bless everybody. Hey, if you feel like this whole conversation could help somebody, love you to share it. Leave a comment. Let us know how we're doing, and especially press that like and subscribe button. God bless you. We're praying for you. We love you guys. See you soon.